Okay, I want to cover three topics today. The first topic, what is communication? Secondly, what is strategic communication? And then the third thing we're going to cover is how to make a strategic communication plan. So let's start at the beginning with communication. So what the heck is communication? Well, first of all, it helps if you have at least two entities involved. Let's call this one the sender. And let's call this one the receiver. And this sender is going to be sending information to the receiver. So you actually don't need to have just one receiver here. You can actually have lots of individuals receiving the information, but it all boils down to a sender, which is going to send information to a receiver. So let's call this receiver our audience. Who are we talking to? The sender, at least for this equation, that's going to be you. And for our information, let's call that our message. So you are going to be sending a message, some information to your audience. This is who you are talking to. So sometimes you'll be able to send information to the receiver, to the audience, but maybe they are not receiving that information exactly the way you had intended it. They know you're sending them an information packet. They know that you are sending them some bits of info, but they're just not getting it the way you intended. That's because you also have noise involved. The noise can be anything that interrupts this message from getting from you, the sender, to the receiver. There's also different ways to send this information to the receiver, and let's call those channels. Channels can include spoken information. Right now, I am speaking to my audience. You can also send information via a text message or an email. You can pay for a TV advertisement. Lots of different ways that you can get the message to the audience through channels. That's communication. Now let's talk a little bit about strategic communication. And I tend to oversimplify things. So in my mind, strategic communication is simply communicating with a plan. That's all it is. You are going to communicate, like we spoke about right here, but with a plan involved. So what elements do you need for this plan? First of all, you need to identify your audience. Who are we talking to? Secondly, you need a message. What is it that they need to know? From there, you can figure out further here, how are we going to get that message to our audience? This is going to depend on the message in particular that you're trying to get also to a particular audience. So you'll probably want to identify some channels. And again, you can choose lots of different channels. These should be specific to your message and your audience. Now, if you need to tell your roommate that rent is due next week, you probably don't need a 30-second TV spot. You could probably use some kind of verbal communication. Tell them, hey, we got rent due. Maybe you want to send them a text message. Maybe you want to send them an email. Maybe leave a Post-it note on the refrigerator. Lots of different specific ways you can deliver that message to this audience. Those won't always work for every kind of message. So say you want to let everyone know that enrollment deadlines for an upcoming semester are also next week. Probably won't work by putting a Post-it note on the refrigerator. You're probably going to need some combination of email, maybe some social media, maybe some other ways to communicate that message. So you can identify your different channels that you want here. Another important consideration here is frequency and timing. Oftentimes, it does not work if you send your message one time or only send it through one channel. So maybe you start with an email campaign, then you follow that up with some social media, maybe some Instagram ads, maybe something else. Maybe you also have signage, billboards or TV screens or something else. Maybe this is around campus or around the workplace. And maybe you follow that up again with another email. So there's lots of different ways to stagger the timing, stagger the frequency, all to make sure that you have the best plan in place to get this message to your audience. Another incredibly important part of a communication plan is metrics. How do we know it worked? Maybe you're a soap company and you are trying to tell your audience, those would be consumers, that your soap is the best and they need to buy it. Metric would be, hey, soap sales increased, they're through the roof. That means you've done this correctly. If you organize a strategic communication plan where you've identified an audience and a message, and if you've delivered that message through channels to that audience, and it does not get to your audience the way you had intended, that's also an important metric. That means things are not working as you wanted them to, and you need to go back and revise your plan. So that's it. This is communication. It involves you sending a message to an audience through channels, and a communication plan including your audience, who you're talking to, that message, what is it they need to know, sending that message through channels, and then very important metrics, measuring whether or not this worked. That's it. Thanks.